Welcome to In Studio from Simply Timeless. I'm Jay Daniels. This week we bring you a special interview from Jazz at Lincoln Center in New York City. That's where I recently met with saxophonist and composer Ted Nash. He's just put out the album Somewhere Else, West Side Story Songs. During the interview, we talk about that release and its relevance to life in 2019. Ted also shares some deeply personal thoughts on jazz and its connection to the human spirit. Our conversation begins with Ted's family influence, beginning with his dad and uncle.
My uncle and my father were both in the swing era. My father caught the tail end of the swing era. He was in the early 50s. He was playing trombone with the Tex Beneke big band. But my uncle was with Les Brown's band, which at the time that he was in the band, like in 46 and 47, was one of the premier bands and touring. And Doris Day was the singer in the band. So there's that kind of history of people who are just well caught up in a whole life of jazz and touring and all of that kind of stuff. But in the case of my uncle and my father, they both had dreams and set their goals to being studio musicians. My uncle knew what he wanted to do. He knew he wanted a career in commercial music. He loved playing flute and clarinet, which is called doubling as a saxophone player. And he's 5 years older. He was 5 years older than my father. So when he got settled into the studios in Los Angeles, he told my father, look, man, you need to come here because this is a scene and it's growing and it's going to be great. So my father followed and then also gave up sort of the jazz route and became a commercial musician. So I grew up in that kind of environment of people who had an incredible background in jazz and were incredible musicians, but also chose something, a more practical lifestyle.
And your dad was still an active performer when you were coming up. Did you grow up then in California on the West Coast? Or where did life begin for you?
Yeah, because they were both in Los Angeles. And in fact, my mother was a fantastic singer. My father and my mother both were born and raised in Boston area. So they made the trek out to LA together in 1953. My mom gave up singing just because she preferred a more traditional sort of raise the kids and be home kind of lifestyle. And I think singing also kind of, just the idea of taking it seriously and being a professional was a bit frightening for her, a little overwhelming. But Los Angeles is where I grew up, and I grew up really kind of in the Hollywood scene, because I would follow my father and my uncle, and I would watch them record these movies. They're on so many soundtracks of some of the greatest films in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. Great records, things I know you like Frank Sinatra records, Ella Fitzgerald records. So this is the kind of environment I grew up in. And I kind of thought that I would follow in their footsteps. I wanted to play classical clarinet at first, and then I thought about, wow, I want to be a studio musician like my dad. But that thing, man, it just hit me. I was 14 or 15, and I discovered Charlie Parker, and that was it.
Now, were you an only child growing up?
No, I have a brother. I have two siblings. I have one of each. I have a brother and a sister. And we kind of laugh about, because my father, my mom, didn't go to school, like college, like formal education. My brother didn't. I didn't go to any kind of music conservatory or anything like that. My sister I think went to 1 year of school, but we've all found our paths. My brother is Bill Nash is his name. He makes guitars, and he's very, very successful, Nash Guitars. And my sister is the associate director of the Conan O'Brien television show. And she's been doing that pretty much since the beginning with him. So they're very active and creative people.
And as a matter of clarification, the city of Nashville is not named after your family. Is that correct?
That is a fact.
So you're listening to Charlie Parker as a teen growing up. What was it that hit you the most about that sound?
I think with Charlie Parker, it was the fact that even though he's playing these notes and it was a bit theoretical at times, it always had a very melodic and bluesy quality, which made me connect with him. It felt like I understood him. It was the first time I really heard music where I said, wow, I feel the humanity of this person, and I can hear what they're thinking. I can hear what they're feeling, and that's very attractive. And I think especially when you're younger, and for me at that time, being more involved up until then, playing technical exercises, practicing etudes and classical music, and there didn't seem to be a lot of room in that music for personal expression. So with Charlie Parker, suddenly there is not only incredible harmony and theoretical knowledge, but this just overwhelming sense of melody and feeling and expression. And even though maybe I didn't know exactly what that was or why I was attracted to it, I know what that is now, and I know why I was attracted to it then.
I'm thinking of a ballad that Charlie Parker did. What was it, Parker's Mood or something like that?
That was one, yeah.
I heard that very recently, and it gripped me to the core. It did.
Yeah.
It's one of those songs that I think there have been vocalese lyrics assigned since then. But even without lyrics, as someone who started out playing the piano and then singing, there are some songs that don't even need words, and yet somehow they connect with you. You ever heard that expression, no matter how you're feeling, whether it's been a good day or a bad day, no matter where you are in life, there is a song for every one of those moments. You ever think about that?
Well, I haven't heard that exact expression, but I think that that's the reason why all these songs have been written, is because people have felt such an incredible range of emotions. And thank God we have music to be able to express that. And of course, a lot of music has been written with a purpose of, say, a musical, or could be opera, or it could be just, any kind of a purpose that the music has, whether it's film or anything. But I think that when you're a true artist, you access your emotions and you allow it to come out in the music. So it's very pure, as opposed to it being a project or being something for something. I mean, people are very good. I mean, these songwriters that we've had in the last century are incredible at accessing some kind of emotion, because they have to express something that supports the emotional content of, say, a movie or a film. And the lyrics have to tell a story that needs to be told for that particular project. But when it's just you and you can do anything you want, it's unlimited. And if you access your own emotions and feelings, can do that, your music can be much, much deeper. And I think that that's something that often takes a while for people to develop. I know for me, my music when I was younger wasn't that personal. It felt it didn't have me as much in it. And I think that's the beauty of getting older, is that you can access yourself and you have the better ability to put yourself into the work that you do.
We're thinking about stories, and of course your musical story really took shape when you first heard Charlie Parker in your mid-teens. So at first, what did you do with that? Were there opportunities, say in jazz ensembles or anything around school, that you were able to be a part of?
I was really lucky to have an incredible music director for high school, a high school jazz band named Leonard Gagliardi. He was so passionate. I mean, he used to play saxophone, I think in the late 30s and maybe early 40s. He was probably in some of those kind of swing era bands. But this guy would get so excited about the music that he'd start frothing at the mouth. I mean, I can remember times he was like, he'd be even in the marching band, he would like, this is where your knee has got to be. And he'd put his knee up in the air and he'd be marching. And the passion that he had was incredible. We'd kind of laugh about it, at the time, like he's kind of nerdy in that sense. But whoa, I mean, to have that as your band director. So he was the one who said, hey, you're coming into this band now. It's 10th grade. I can see that you're talented and you want to play, but you don't know much about improvisation. So you should study improvisation. And he mentioned a guy named Charlie Shoemake. He's a vibes player. He used to play with George Shearing back in the 60s. Anyway, he had this whole process, this whole program about teaching jazz improvisation. And so I just started taking lessons with him, not knowing a thing about improvisation. That's where I first heard Charlie Parker. And it was sort of like, not only did I want to be able to improvise, because I could hear other people doing it. I could hear the kids that were a year older than me being able to just make up stuff. They just are just playing and making stuff up, and it makes sense, and I didn't know how to do that. So you have this desire to do that. And it's one thing to hear it. Like you hear Charlie Parker, but it's like, how is he doing that? What is he thinking about? How does he put those notes together? There's obviously some kind of harmony and chords. I didn't know what that was in the beginning.
But we all talk about developing our musical voice. And this is where you go from playing what's already been written. Take a standard, for instance, like All the Things You Are. Charlie Parker had a very distinctive introduction. And you think about making things up. When you approach things like improvisation, playing around the melody, as Louis Armstrong would have said, what are the things that you're thinking about that you want to go into that improvisation?
It's such a great question. And it's a hard one to answer because I think it's so personal. I think people's approach to playing is so personal, which is what makes jazz so special. I mean, what separates jazz from a lot of music is the fact that there's improvisation. I mean, there's improvisation in blues and in bluegrass music and a lot of stuff. There's improvisation, but it really is at the core of what jazz is. And I think that's why that music is so attractive to people who are improvisers. And you learn, you develop all of this technique, and you develop an understanding of harmony, melody, rhythm, and all of that. And then it's just can be whatever you feel, whatever you want. And it's hard to say. It's like this special, magical place that you go. And no one, it's this weird thing that you understand and you have. And it's why I'm saying it's hard to describe this thing. But it's like, okay, now people could take everything that I own away from me. They could put me in jail. They could beat me. But they can't take the essence of the soul of this thing that is improvisation. It's so personal, and it's a feeling, and it's something that it doesn't matter what happens, you will always have it. And I think that we can create music and create environments where we can do this. And I think that when you listen to jazz musicians, after like one bar, you say, oh, that's John Coltrane. Oh, that's Louis Armstrong. Oh, that's Miles Davis. It's not because of the notes necessarily that they choose. That's part of it. But it's because you feel their soul. Somehow they're able to express and expose something of themselves that's their soul. And there are musicians that you don't recognize so much because they don't do as good a job of that, I think. This is my personal take on it. But you can hear like Coleman Hawkins, and in 2 beats you know who it is because of his phrasing, because of his vibrato, and because of who he is. And I think that's the main thing, is that jazz is an opportunity for us to understand something at a deeper level about ourselves, to get to know ourselves. And if we can do that, we can let other people know who we are as well. I think that's what, for me, is so unique about jazz.
We're speaking with Ted Nash in studio from Simply Timeless. He's just released the album Somewhere Else, West Side Story Songs, and I want to get to that album in a few moments. Mm-hmm. But you're speaking of all of these wonderful influences, putting the pieces together. And there are many experiences that have occurred for you over the years. But what were some of the things that you got to do throughout your career? And you've had quite an illustrious career over the past few decades.
I've managed to play with a lot of people that I really love and respect. And it's so funny, if someone were to come to you and say, in 10 years, you'll be doing this. In 10 years, you'll be living here, or you'll be playing with this person, or you'll be married to this person, or you'll be doing this, or any kind of major event in your life. If someone could come up to you and tell you 10 years in advance of it, you just say you're crazy because you don't see the through line to it. Yeah. And it's the same with me. I've been playing with Wynton Marsalis and the Jazz Lincoln Center Orchestra for 20 years. But if someone had come up to me in 1984 and said, or in let's say the late 80s, and said, you will be not only playing with Wynton Marsalis, but he'll be on some of your records and he'll be playing the music that you wrote and things like that, I'd be like, you're crazy. Now get out of here. Because at that time, in maybe the mid to late 80s, I just put him on a pedestal. I thought he was the most incredible artist. I was scared to ever talk to him when I would run into him at a festival or something. And I thought I would never have an opportunity to play with him in my life because he is at such a different level, not only of his musicianship, but also just his success and the amount of notoriety and all those kind of things. So I have to say that, a fantasy can come true, especially if you put your energy towards something. It's not like you just close your eyes or you make some kind of wishes at home or you look in the mirror and say, I'm a good person. It's not like that. But it's so much, it's like the choices you make all along, what you work on, who you play with, the things that you say yes to, always lead you in the direction that you are supposed to go. And I think that that's the thing. We have to always respect the choices that are put in front of us and take them very seriously. So I'm very blessed that the paths that have happened for me have taken me in directions that I really wanted to go.
And you've recorded well over a dozen albums in your time. And in each of those, you further develop your voice. And you're a multi-reed player, playing the saxophone, clarinet, and flute. Where do you feel most at home as far as instruments are concerned? I mean, you play at least 3 reed instruments that I'm aware of. So primarily, I think people know you for your work as a saxophonist, but is that where you feel most at home?
Part of my problem, I think, and when I say problem, it's sort of like why, like when you think of Sonny Rollins, you think of the tenor sax, and you think about the certain way he played. And there's other people like the same thing. You think about their instrument and think about a particular style of music maybe that they played. And I think that in some ways, I used to think about it this way. I don't think it's that necessarily that way, but that I've done myself a disservice by spreading myself out so much. In other words, I like playing the alto sax. I like playing the tenor sax. Those are so different. Most people would only choose one or the other and create a voice and create a reputation based on that choice. So people don't know, is he an alto player? Is he a tenor player? Is he a doubler? Because I play lots of flutes and clarinets, and that's kind of part of what I do. Is he a composer more than he's a player, or is he really more of an improviser? Is he an uptown guy? Is he a downtown guy? Does he like traditional music? Does he more avant-garde? The thing is, I like all of that stuff because I don't care so much about categories. I don't care so much about style. I care about the content. I care about being creative. And for me, I can find that in a lot of different areas. And so I think that's made it a little harder for people to understand who I am. But I think that's fine because I continue to do it and I continue to do it. Now people, I think, start to understand that is who I am. So that's fine.
You're a versatile musician. But you ever notice how people have this habit of putting things into a box? They have to define things. And I don't know if it's always easy to say, well, Ted is just this, or Ted Nash is just that. Just on your last album, from Live at Dizzy's, you have some of your own works where you really go out there beyond traditional jazz. But then there are works like Emily from, let me see, was it Johnny Mandel, I believe?
That's right.
Where it's just very sentimental. Mm-hmm. And you have personal connections with these songs. And I'm curious about the story behind the concept of your latest album where you tackle, and I say tackle because it can be a challenge, songs from one of the most popular Broadway musicals of all time, West Side Story. And these are not your songs, but somehow you add your own flavor to these songs. And I guess, Ted, my question would have to be, there have been dozens of jazz recordings, not just pop, but jazz recordings of West Side Story. Why here in 2019, of all things that you could have done, why go back to West Side Story? What drew you to that?
There are a number of things that led to this record. First of all, I do want to point out that Bobby Sanabria put out a wonderful record last year, which got a Grammy Award. I think for Best Large Jazz Ensemble. Anyway, that was a big band and his arrangements of West Side Story. So yeah, even in recent history, there's been a lot of attention paid to this music, and it's worthy of the attention that it gets because it's the songs one after another are just gems. They're each one a perfect song, and I don't think there's a musical that has a collection of songs, in my opinion, that are as consistently just perfect and beautiful. The reason why we started playing this music is because in 2018, which was Bernstein's centennial, Ben Allison, Steve Cardenas, and I went down to Havana. We played the Havana Jazz Festival. This was last year. And as part of our purpose for being there, we decided to do a tribute to Bernstein. And so we could have chosen any of his music over any of his career and done that. But then we started talking about it. It was like just the concept of doing a theme like this, where it's just one set of songs, and I couldn't think of a better collection of songs than West Side Story. So we just, so as a trio, you listen to West Side Story, and it's very brass heavy and rhythm heavy. A lot of the stuff, you hear a lot of percussion instruments and trombones, trumpets, and all that kind of ways of adding rhythm and strength to this music. So this group that I have with Ben and Steve is very intimate, and that was kind of partly why we put this band together, is because we liked the space in the music, we liked the intimacy and the interplay that we get from being together. And our last record, called Quiet Revolution, dealt mostly with the music of Jim Hall and Jimmy Giuffre, and I think we have a couple originals on there. But this record is an example of how jazz musicians can go in any way with music. I mean, you take a standard song, it is a format that has been going on for a long time, right? Jazz musicians take a standard and play it. Or they might reharmonize it. They try to figure out clever ways of reinterpreting it. And, you do that. There's this expression called reharmonization, reharm. They call it reharm, and they say that the key word is harm because you can do harm to something by trying too hard to reharmonize it and make it something else, right? So, and can I tell you a funny story about Stephen Sondheim? We did a program at the City Center, and it was kind of like one of their encores programs. Here in New York, they have a series. It's like, a lot of times it's a Broadway show, revival kind of stuff, encores. We did an encores program that was all Sondheim music. We had Bernadette Peters and some other fantastic singers. And so we wrote all the music for the program in the Jazz and Lincoln Center Orchestra. So we had like 20-something charts of Sondheim's. And I was given the responsibility of doing Send in the Clowns. Now, we did it, that was going to be just a band piece in between the songs that were sung by these actors. So it was like a piece that would be played while they're changing and getting into their next role or whatever. So I did what I thought was kind of a very creative take on Send in the Clowns. I added some extra chords. I made kind of a piano piece out of it with all these moving voicings and kind of stuff. So I really did reharmonize it, made it like a little bass clarinet feature. And I didn't think that Stephen Sondheim would ever even hear about this or know about it. And I thought I could just be creative, create something for the band. Well, it turns out that he was at our rehearsals and he was at most of our concerts. And I didn't know who he was. I didn't know what he looked like. People would say, oh, Stephen Sondheim was at the concert, was at the rehearsal. I'm like, oh my God, I started feeling embarrassed because like, what did I do? Like, what did I do to his song? I've like completely ruined his song.
That whole reharm,
the harm that I brought to it. So finally, last night of the concert, we're having the after party. I'm like, someone said Stephen Sondheim is here. And I'm like, would somebody please point him out to me so I know what he looks like so I can go say hi? That's him over there. He was sitting at this little table. And I went over. I said, excuse me, sir, my name is Ted Nash. He goes, yes, it is. I was like, anyway, I just wanted to, and he goes, he interrupted me. He says, I think I owe you some money. I said, sir, you owe me some money? He said, yeah, for those extra chords that you put on my song. And I started laughing. I was like, I'm so sorry. He goes, no, actually. He said he actually liked it and he wanted me to send him a copy of it so he could check it out. So it turned out okay. But this is an example of how jazz musicians often will take these standards and completely turn them upside down. And sometimes I think it works, and sometimes I think it is harmful. In the case of Somewhere Else, which is the name of this record that we did with Steve and Ben, we wanted to really respect these compositions for what they are. And we didn't want to get in the way of the context and the form of these songs by going too far away from them. Largely, we got together and we messed around with them. We kind of improvised. and just came up with things. And these little arrangements that we have were kind of organically created out of us just playing and just sort of improvising and thinking of different ways to interpret them. So for us, it's very natural. It feels very natural.
Were you a fan of West Side Story growing up? Because you had mentioned several years ago that you had watched the film.
Yeah, the very first time I saw it was with my family. I was probably an early teenager, and I remember we watched it. My sister is 5 years older than me, and I think she was really into it and everything. And for me, it just seemed a little stiff, a little staged because of all the dancing and how people would just start singing in the middle of nowhere. Like that was confusing to me. It's like, because realistic movies and plays, and all of a sudden in a musical they'll just start bursting into song, and it almost felt very unnatural to me. It was just like a weird thing. It was like it was like a prejudice I had against that kind of way of entertainment, of a way of having songs and things. It just felt unnatural. Like, why are they singing? That doesn't happen in real life. It's a whole genre of that I didn't really understand and respect, which I do now, and it can be extremely moving. And this particular show is, I mean, it's so strong. And it deals with social concepts and things that are so valid and so active today that we still need to keep re-looking at.
And wouldn't you say that jazz music as a whole, and especially this album with these songs, because I thought about this. Somebody said that West Side Story is a great soundtrack for the life of people coming to America. It's a soundtrack for starting a new life in this country. Do you think that's still very much relevant today as it was when this musical initially came out?
The United States, America, has always represented a place for people to come. And I think that we have to continue to remind ourselves about that. Think about the Statue of Liberty. Think about what this country represented. And why suddenly do we want to just end that beautiful history that we have? I mean, there are practical considerations, obviously, economically and different things like that need to be looked at. But I think that when you look at a theme like this, it's always important to remind yourself of what is it based on and why is it important and why was it so successful and why are these themes so incredibly inspiring, and apply them to your current life and your current day situation and see if you can be inspired perhaps to continue to develop in a way that benefits everybody. I think that we're getting very divisive, and we're getting very selfish, and people are trying to protect things. And there's a lot of reasons why people feel maybe like there's something they need to protect. But when it comes down to the concept of this record and concept of people having a place to come, a safe place to come, I hate the fact that so much is being done to stop that from happening. And I'm just me as a person, I would love if we could just open up borders and just say, hey, everybody come, let's all get along, let's be together in this world, and we all have the same goals basically as human beings. And it's tough. And I think right now we also have a particularly tough situation going on politically that's making it very, very hard. And I like the idea of a record like this and the themes behind this recording or this musical to remind ourselves about humanity and about people, and the fact that even though we come from different places, we're all essentially same. We're human beings. I'm kind of riffing off there a little bit, but I mean, it's very important to me. And my parents were civil rights activists. Our home was opened up to all sorts of different kinds of people from different backgrounds. And so maybe I'm not expressing it very clearly, but it is extremely important to me, this kind of thing.
I'm thinking about the jazz community as a family. And I always think about my very first live jazz show that I went to in Durham, North Carolina. And I had grown up in the countryside of Central Virginia. We were all the same. Everybody around us mostly believed the same things. And then I go to this jazz show, and I still had a lot of learning, a lot of exploring to do. But I went in I went in and I saw people in all sorts of different attire, from very different ethnicities, different backgrounds, faiths, creeds. And yet they were all together and they were all mingling together. And you know what thing brought them together? Music. And there are many different angles that you can view music. There are a number of artists who are overtly political from the stage during their performances. I'm not sure how I feel about that at this point. I think people need to express themselves. I think that can be done without alienating your audience.
I agree with you.
But I will tell you, Ted, you think about this whole, the themes that this album represents, and I think it's very indicative of the jazz community and the state of affairs as it is today. How do you see then your performances, your recordings? How do you see those bits helping to advance this conversation on social issues such as equality, immigration, the things that you brought up? How do you see just a simple thing such as performances interacting with those sort of conversations?
I mean, it's an incredible question, and it's hard because for me, I haven't liked using music or performing or being on stage or social media or any of that as a platform for me to talk about my political beliefs.
Yes.
I've not felt that is a place for me to do that. I feel like, but you're right, the music itself, the community aspect of it, the fact that we're sharing, the fact that we can share the music and be of different genders, sexes, different races, ages, all sorts of things like that, speaks a lot for not only what jazz music is, and I think music in general and the arts, but also the fact that it just continues to show you how people can be together and get together. And I think jazz is such an incredible opportunity for us to show that to people, to say, like you just said, you saw the first concert, jazz concert, and that's you're not telling me about the music, you're telling me about that experience that you had of who was in the audience and who was experiencing and how it brought people together. It's a connector. And I think that's why I'm so attracted to jazz music. I mean, yeah, I had parents that were very open-minded, both jazz musicians, both kind of hippie, 60s. There's a lot of, I could tell you stories about my household and things and the parties and the Black Panthers coming over and my parents and the things that they did. And it has had an incredible effect on me, being open to people of completely different backgrounds. I feel like I wish the music itself would be strong enough, or the messages that are in the songs, or the messages that are in the music, or even in the performance, or the improvisation, or the message that comes from the way people play together would be strong enough to inspire and influence people to make choices that I think would better humankind and our whole world. I'm not sure how powerful instrumental music is in that way. I think that lyrics and songs and things where the words are spoken or sung are more direct, so you can actually tell people what it is and they can understand right away. Instrumental music's a little different. It's subtler, and but I think the people who are in tune to it or willing to be in tune to it can get something and get inspiration from it. And that's my goal, is not to impress people with my understanding, my technique, my feeling about harmony or any of that, but is to move people by the music. In other words, for them to listen to it and be moved and hopefully feel like, wow, this is what I'm saying is my goal. This is absolutely what I wish my music could be, is that people could come away from that and say, I want to be a better person. I want to investigate something. I feel something. I felt these musicians were sharing and opening their lives and their souls to me. What can I do to be able to do that with other people? And maybe I can help. And if somehow that spreads out and makes everybody have that same kind of what can I do feeling of what can I do to be better? What can I do to help other people? What can I do to move other people? it'd be like a movement. It'd be like this incredible movement, but it's a bit optimistic, maybe.
Ted Nash, our guest this week during In Studio from Simply Timeless. Be sure and visit his website, tednash.com, for a complete listing of tour dates and other information about his new release, Somewhere Else, West Side Story Songs. Our thanks to Ted and also to Jazz at Lincoln Center for hosting us during this interview. Until we meet again, I'm Jay Daniels, thanking you for joining us in studio.